So Amazon has just bought the rights to a Lord of the Rings TV show for over $250 million. Apparently that's what they paid just for the rights alone, and they're going to be spending over $1 billion trying to recreate the series, or some of the series, perhaps events preceding Lord of the Rings. $1 billion over several seasons, that's going to be crazy. So we're going to talk about what they could possibly use with the property, and we're going to be using your comments in our commentary.
Luna, high five. You're not good. Oh, that's not a high five. It's not a high five. I guess she's getting over her fear of heights.
Alright guys, we are doing our Geekly vlog. We asked you guys in last week's Geekly poll, what would you like to see most from the Lord of the Rings Amazon series, and 223 of you have voted so far. These are your results.
So 39% of you say, I want to see works like Silmarillion and Children of the Hurin. 9% of you say, I want them to remake The Hobbit. 18% of you say, I want to see new tales set in between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. 6% of you say, the only tale worth putting on screen is The Lord of the Rings. And 28% of you say they should be telling the story of what happens after The Lord of the Rings. So let's discuss.
Joe Sheep, most people don't even know Middle-earth has more than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, so it would be great for them to share stories people haven't heard of, like the Silmarillion, like Children of Hurin, and there's other stories that Tolkien has written about, so I'd like to see that.
I feel like it could be tricky as far as like how to compress so much information into one show.
Right, Silmarillion happens over
like
several
thousands of years, right?
ages.
Yeah, so I mean, how do you make a TV show about that? Okay, so Justin Mansfield, you say, honestly, I'd say that eventually I'd like to see all of the above, but I'd say I'd like to see them start with the history of Middle-earth and work their way through everything, Hobbit stuff between Lord of the Rings, before going beyond Lord of the Rings. I think they could keep the stories going for a long time that way. It would be confusing if they started later and then decided to go back and fill in the background story. Best to start with the Silmarillion and work toward as chronologically as possible. And yeah, I guess it just makes sense. I feel like if they were to try to like redo Lord of the Rings and then go back, I mean, no matter what, I think a lot of the people watching the show will kind of know what they're talking about anyway, because it's going to be all fans of Lord of the Rings for the most part. But to retell such perfect stories doesn't really make much sense. The show should be giving us more.
Lucian, you say Silmarillion would be cool to see, but it's quite a difficult book to read as characters' names change as book goes on. Kept having to flick back to remind myself who is who. Also, I do believe Tolkien never actually finished writing it, as success of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit sidetracked him. Could be interesting, but we really don't need a Lord of the Rings series. That's true. Again, the book takes place over thousands of years with different characters. It goes through some of the history of the elves and stuff like that. It also touches a little bit upon the story of the Children of Hurin, and it was eventually finished by Christopher Tolkien, his son, not J.R.R. Tolkien. It would be very difficult to put to screen. Let's just put it that way.
No.
Mr. C2C, I think the Silmarillion Children of Hurin have the most material to draw from, true, but I'm worried whether they will set the right tone for the show. The Silmarillion is consistently more serious and grim than both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but at the same time it's also more epic since it's essentially the Bible of Middle-earth. Yeah, actually, that's a good way to put it, actually. I don't know if an episodic TV schedule can allow that epicness to translate properly. That said, they also have a serious chance at world building because a series would allow them to flesh out certain characters more, and especially because the world of the Silmarillion is the foundation for Lord of the Rings, etc., if they focus on certain storylines. I don't think it will give us everything we want, but if they stay focused to certain stories like The Children of Hurin, or my personal favorite, The Story of Maeglin, I think Amazon could make a good series. Yeah, you kind of nailed it. Just like I don't think you can make a proper TV show about the Bible, because there's so many different stories, there's so many different characters over such a long period of time, it just wouldn't work on a TV setting like it does in a collection of books. And I don't think it will work for the general audience, so I don't think Amazon is going to go that route.
Are you okay? So Lewis, you say, I would like the new series to be based on Tolkien's work as it was, his world, and it wouldn't feel right if Amazon came up with their own idea. Also, I think the show should not be based at all on the previous films as they have been covered enough. I actually completely agree with everything you just said. I am not opposed to more Lord of the Rings, but I feel like Tolkien created something so perfect and wonderful that I don't want them to mess it all up by just segueing. Like, then it wouldn't be canon, it would be fan fiction in my eyes. So which way is north? So Queen Moriarty, you say, people need to know about his works other than The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. What happened previous to The Hobbit is a massive and important part of Tolkien's work, and is a great way to have more of that universe without ruining the already perfect Lord of the Rings. I'd also like to see a better and faithful Hobbit adaptation, but I don't think a TV series is the best way to do it. Yeah, and I agree, like, I don't want them to just retread over things that we already have, with the exception of The Hobbit. Like, he really wasn't a fan of The Hobbit. I didn't mind it so much, but I did not read The Hobbit, so that's probably why.
Well, I read The Hobbit, and it's just bad. It was a bad adaptation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I didn't read it, so it's probably why I wouldn't notice that it's a bad adaptation. Yeah. But it's just hard because the more that I hear about the Silmarillion, I feel like it would come out like more of a documentary, since it's not told from one specific point of view, from what I've gathered. Correct me if I'm wrong. Since it takes place over such a vast period of time, where do you pinpoint where the most stuff happens?
Definitely, Lewis. You say, I think if they start again doing The Hobbit first, maybe one season of that, then move into Lord of the Rings in season 2 if it hits off, because it can be done given the right circumstances. Just look at Game of Thrones. The problem with that logic is that The Hobbit happens, I think, 60 years before Lord of the Rings, so it would have to be an entirely different cast, except for
Like-
Bilbo, perhaps. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I grew up in Homestead. Now, Yan, you have a really interesting comment in my opinion. I always saw Sauron as the lesser of two great evils. Sauron wants to rule over all things to create, as he sees it, order. Morgoth is the big bad evil. Morgoth wants to destroy all and corrupt all. Sauron was his underling, just one of Morgoth's many lieutenants. That's why I want to see the war against Morgoth. Morgoth has everything Sauron has, but bigger and badder. He's got the Balrogs and the Ungoliant on his side. Ungoliant, the mother of Shelob, and a spider so big she died eating herself to sate her insatiable appetite. That might be a little graphic to put on screen. I mean, I don't even know how that's possible. Like,
Yeah, what?
yeah, that's kind of crazy, actually. Jen was saying something a little earlier about Sauron.
I don't know. I'm having a hard time figuring out how to explain it, but I think the movies had such a huge budget that they were really able to portray Sauron's power in such a grand way. And with a TV show, with not, like, their budget is really high, but it's still just a TV show compared to like the full-fledged, cinema experience. I'm worried that they won't be able to capture Morgoth's power. That's just what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I mean, it's doable, and they do have $1 billion to play with, which is more than any other TV show, I think, and definitely more than any of the individual Lord of the Rings films. But
Yeah, I mean, it could be really interesting, but then would it be a story told through Sauron's eyes?
I doubt it. No.
Like how do you even...
Maybe a multi...
Sauron's eye.
Ooh, good one.
Hey.
The 8 Gaming, with $1 billion and a fresh set of eyes, they could do something better with The Hobbit than what we got. You're right. But I think that story is overblown already. What that movie needed was less money and less time. And less reliance on CGI, definitely.
Marcus Ripley, you say, I believe they could do one of two things. They could do something similar to Star Wars The Force Awakens and have the main enemy be a remnant of the armies from Lord of the Rings. Or they could have a different plot entirely to show that the problems of Sauron in the Middle-earth are not limited to the One Ring. Maybe have a supernatural force driving the series to create the ring and resurrect Sauron. Which, I mean, that kind of would be covered if they did the Silmarillion. So I think that could be cool if they show the rings being made, or them giving them to everyone and everyone getting corrupted by the rings. It would just be hard to evoke hope out of a story like that, which I think hope and looking for the betterment of people is kind of a driving force in all fantasy. And I think that's what Tolkien was kind of going for, looking for the good in Middle-earth to save. So if you're kind of starting at that point with everyone getting corrupted, I wonder how they would do that.
Luna's getting too big for us to keep carrying her. She's about 30, going on 40 pounds. But thank you guys so much for all your comments. Not as many comments this week, but it was actually a nice group of comments. It didn't feel like it was too much. Didn't drag out. But thank you so much. We had a fun time. And next week we're going to be talking about the DC Extended Universe, particularly what they should do now after the massive box office failure that was Justice League.
So disappointed.
If you haven't heard already, it only made $94 million in its opening weekend domestically, which is incredibly low for a superhero film of its caliber. It boasts 3 of the greatest superheroes of all time, and it's the DC Extended Universe film that performed the least in its opening weekend. It actually performed less than any other superhero film this year that are PG-13. Which is just nuts.
Just sad.
It's
I'm sad.
crazy. It's
I
absolutely
liked
nuts.
the film, and I don't care what you say, I liked it.
But next week we're going to be talking about what they should do. So get your comments ready.
Bye.
Bye.